See that people are joining. Welcome to all. Good morning. Thank you very much for being with us. This is an event on the EU and Belarus that is co-organized by the Paris office and the wider Europe program of the European Council on Foreign Relations. We are the pan-European think tank working on foreign policy. We have 7 offices in 7 European capitals and 5 research programs. In the Paris office, we cover French foreign policy in general, and we also have the chance of hosting 2 programs of ECFR, the European Power Program and the Wider Europe Program. Wider Europe covers EU relations with Russia, the Eastern Partnership countries, Turkey, and the Western Balkans. They have staff in Paris, Berlin, London, and Sofia. They worked from day one on Belarus, but they've been doing a lot of work on the Eastern Partnership as well, relations with Russia, of course, and their head, Nicu Popescu, is based in Paris. I would like to extend special thanks to the embassies of Lithuania, Poland, and Romania in Paris, who are our partners for this event and who came to us with the idea of setting this up. And I have to say, we've had 700 registrations until yesterday evening, so that's quite a lot, and it's attracting a lot of people. Some housekeeping rules for the audience. There will be no chat, but there is a Q&A box. Don't hesitate to use it. There will be time for an exchange after the second panel. This is an on-the-record conversation, and it will be recorded. We will be discussing today the chances for regime change in Belarus in 2021. How is Europe planning to keep Belarus on the agenda, and whether it will provide more political support for Belarusian civil society. Also, what are Russia's plans for Belarus in 2021? It is now time for me to introduce my extremely distinguished panel, and I wish to convey to them and to the audience the personal emotion and honor that I feel co-hosting this with Nicu Popescu. So first of all, Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya, the leader of Democratic Belarus, a human rights activist, Jean-Yves Le Drian, Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, Gabrielus Landsbergis, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, Zbigniew Rau, Minister of Foreign Affairs Poland, and finally Bogdana Oreshku, Minister of Foreign Affairs Romania, and I myself am the head of the Paris office of ECFR. Ms. Tsikhanovskaya, the floor is yours now. Thank you. You are muted.
Dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the European Council on Foreign Relations for organizing this discussion about Belarus after the August presidential election. Last year, Belarusians began protesting against the rigged election results, lawlessness, and police violence. And our peaceful movement acquired several important symbols. And today I'd like to mention one of them. I believe Minister Le Drian has heard about it as well. It is Eve, a simple portrait of a woman painted in France by Haim Sutin, an artist of Belarusian origin. This Eve became the face of our revolution. Belarusians responded to the tyranny with art and non-violence. There were hundreds of thousands of peaceful Belarusians in the streets. The creative female protests, the students singing in the universities, strikes applauding in the factories, astonishing rallies of the elderly and people with special needs, the parties of the neighbors, and so on. The whole world saw it. However, now the picture is somewhat different. It's harder to find the photos of beautiful mass rallies in Minsk on the covers of the international newspapers, as was the case recently. And there is a question, does it mean that the protests have finished? No, it does not. Belarusians have been peacefully protesting all across the country every single day for almost half a year already. The problem is that the only language that Lukashenko's regime seems to know is the language of violence. Belarusians go on protesting every day, but they are also kidnapped, beaten, and illegally imprisoned every day. This terror is not a very beautiful picture to look at, but the world must see it. The regime's continuous repression particularly intensified in November, when the previous Lukashenko's presidential term expired and he was no longer even formally legitimate. In November, the peaceful rallies were turned into a human hunt, and for 2 Sundays in a row, there were more than 1,000 arrests in a day. The young artist Roman Bondarenko was beaten to death reportedly by the official from Lukashenko's cronies. His family was threatened, and the doctor and journalist who told the truth about him are now in prison. The most politically active neighborhoods of Minsk were taken under 24-hour control by the police. One of them, Novaya Borovaya, was left without heating and water for almost 3 days. There are reasons to consider that this was done intentionally. And we have heard the recording of Nikolai Karpenkov, Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, who tells his subordinates that Lukashenko lets them shoot the protesters on sight, and that a concentration camp for the unnecessary Belarusians should be built, and the world must know about it. These are the circumstances in which Belarusians live, work, and continue their struggle. To this, one should add physical and psychological fatigue, cold winter, and the hard second wave of coronavirus. And despite all that, Belarusians do not give up. They are as brave and creative as they were in summer 2020. Now the protest is decentralized in time and space. Instead of great rallies in the city centers, there are dozens of smaller local rallies and chains of solidarity all over Minsk and other cities. They can happen anywhere, at any time of the day, and any day of the week. They are organized by the communities of neighbors that will certainly become the base for the local self-government in New Belarus. People do not abandon humor and art. They support each other by writing songs, dancing, building snowmen in national colors, and creating everything with white, red, white flags and words, "Live long Belarus." This is still dangerous. In Belarus, one can be detained for the wrong color of trousers or umbrella, and the world should not forget about it. And another front of this struggle is the quickly developing diaspora. Belarusians abroad support their fellow citizens at home and make sure that Belarus doesn't leave the international media agenda. The diaspora helped to pass the Belarus Democracy Act in the US and to cancel the World Hockey Championship and the Pentathlon Championship in Belarus, which would otherwise legitimize Lukashenko's regime. Now, the diaspora try to exclude the Belarusian state TV from the European Broadcasting Union. And I welcome this initiative because Belarusian TV is no longer the place for journalism, but only for propaganda and hate speech. Belarusians are now all over the world, and they invite the world to listen to them. And now I would like to tell about Igor Loisic, a young journalist arrested in false charges on June 25th, 2020. He has been in prison for more than half a year now. To protest, he announced a hunger strike, and all of Belarus was worried about him. People asked him to leave, to be patient, to be sure they will make him free. This Monday, Loisic stopped his hunger strike after 42 days. And he said, This is because he was amazed by the incredible wave of solidarity. He saw that Belarusians have changed, and this gave him hope. "You will not let me down," he writes. Yes, we mustn't let him down. This is what we ask the world and Europe, to help us not to let down Igor Loisic and other political prisoners, who are almost 200 by now. Belarus needs no more sacrifices. Europe needs no more ghettos. The world needs no more concentration camps. Belarusians paid a very high price, some even with their lives, for the dream and the chance to build a new democratic Belarus. We need to hold free and fair elections as soon as possible, making sure that the will of the people is respected. And I truly hope that the EU fourth package of sanctions will be adopted as soon as possible. It's crucial to impose pressure on those responsible for human and civil rights violations, but also target corrupt officials and businessmen. Unfortunately, the reaction of the international community to the political crisis in Belarus is very modest. The adopted sanctions are several times less than after the 2010 elections, when the repressions was dozens of times less. People expect the West to be braver and stronger. There are more opportunities the European Union, United Nations, and OSCE need to consider. In particular, we would appreciate OSCE participating states to lead the mediation process in order to organize inclusive dialogue on peaceful transition in Belarus. Also, we need investigation of crimes against humanity that have already been done and the prevention of the new ones. We ask to establish a high-level investigation body and lead the process of evidence collection. Urgency is essential as state violence and repression continue to increase in Belarus. We also ask two organizations involved in atrocities, AMON and Gubopik, to be recognized as terrorists by foreign governments. And of course, we also need solidarity. The funds originally meant for Lukashenko's oppressive regime need to be redirected to the Belarusian people, civil society, families of the repressed or those participating in national strikes, independent trade unions, and independent media. We hope for a united response across the EU institutions on this matter. And it's important to avoid bureaucracy, as people need support now. Political transformation in Belarus can be achieved only with the support of the European Union, the United States, and other international partners. The West shall speak with one voice with respect to the political crisis in Belarus. And your principled position on Belarus can help us bring closer the day when Belarusians will finally restore their civil right to elect their leaders in free and fair elections. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much for this vehement appeal in favor of a free Belarus. We'll turn to the EU leaders now. We have a pre-recorded video of Minister Le Drian, and I will ask my colleagues to play it now for the audience, please.
Messieurs les ministres, Madame Tikhanovskaya, Mesdames et Messieurs, je veux d'abord remercier le Centre européen pour les relations internationales de m'avoir invité à m'exprimer devant vous. Je veux d'abord redire à Madame Tikhanovskaya, que j'ai rencontrée à 2 reprises et à travers elle au peuple biélorusse notre admiration et notre soutien pour leur détermination et leur courage. Car le prix payé par la population biélorusse depuis le début de sa mobilisation cet été est considérable. Reporters sans frontières décrit désormais la Biélorussie comme le pays le plus dangereux en Europe pour l'exercice du journalisme. Le pays affiche un nombre record d'interpellations et de prisonniers politiques. Nous ne les oublions pas et nous continuerons à exiger leur libération. Dans cette crise, la France, avec ses partenaires européens, n'a qu'un seul objectif, créer les conditions d'un dialogue national et inclusif qui répondent aux aspirations du peuple biélorusse. C'est la seule voie d'une sortie de crise durable. J'y vois 4 priorités pour y parvenir. D'abord, tenir bon sur nos principes. Notre position est sans ambiguïté, comme le président de la République française et moi-même avons eu l'occasion de le dire. Nous ne reconnaissons pas la légitimité d'Alexander Lukashenka. Nous soutenons les aspirations démocratiques du peuple biélorusse. Avec nos partenaires européens, nous appelons à l'établissement d'un dialogue politique inclusif entre les autorités biélorusses et la société civile et nous demandons la libération de tous les prisonniers politiques. C'est un préalable à la mise en place d'un dialogue serein et constructif et c'est un préalable à l'organisation dès que possible d'une élection présidentielle libre et transparente sous l'observation de l'OSCE. Ensuite, en maintenant une pression forte sur les autorités biélorusses, sans porter atteinte à la population biélorusse elle-même. L'Union européenne a fait la preuve depuis le début de cette crise d'une cohésion exemplaire. Nous devons maintenir cette cohésion, c'est notre force, car cette crise nous concerne directement. Les Européens ne sauraient fermer les yeux quand les droits de l'homme et l'état de droit sont remis en question à leurs frontières. Notre cohésion s'est matérialisée par l'adoption de sanctions contre les responsables de la répression. Ces sanctions visent désormais 91 personnes et entités. Les autorités biélorusses le savent, il sera élargi si la situation devait continuer à se détériorer. Mais ces mesures ne doivent pas porter atteinte de façon indiscriminée à la population biélorusse et nous veillons à cette approche proportionnée et juste. J'ai également souhaité que nous renforcions notre soutien à la société civile biélorusse et à sa capacité de résilience. Ce volet de notre action est indispensable, il permet de préserver la possibilité d'un changement démocratique en Biélorussie. La France a donc augmenté ses moyens d'action et de financement. Il bénéficie aux médias indépendants, aux étudiants universitaires biélorusses, mais aussi au monde de la culture, lui aussi particulièrement ciblé. Ce soutien à la société civile, c'est aussi le sens de la présence de notre ambassadeur à Minsk, qui a pris récemment ses fonctions avec ce mandat très clair. Enfin, toutes ces actions doivent permettre l'émergence d'un dialogue politique inclusif entre Biélorusses. Ce dialogue politique ne pourra aboutir que s'il est mené avec toutes les parties prenantes, y compris avec les autorités. Il nécessite donc que nous, Européens, maintenions une forme d'engagement vigilant avec elles, et il faut le faire sans aucune complaisance à leur égard. C'est le sens de la position commune européenne que nous avons adoptée dans le cadre de la revue des relations entre l'Union européenne et la Biélorussie. Elle nous permet d'adresser au régime un double signal, condamnation de la répression, mais aussi ouverture à la poursuite du dialogue. Voilà le sens de l'action que nous menons. Dans cette crise, la France soutiendra toute solution politique répondant aux aspirations profondes du peuple biélorusse. L'enjeu de cette crise pour les Européens est fondamental. Il y va de notre capacité à soutenir l'aspiration au changement d'un peuple voisin, un peuple qui partage nos valeurs, un peuple qui ne souhaite pas voir des considérations géopolitiques l'emporter sur sa capacité à décider de son avenir. C'est une immense responsabilité pour nous, comme pour tous les acteurs de cette crise. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
So one of the things that Minister Le Drian mentions in his video is the strength of EU cohesion. And we'll turn now to the other ministers on the panel, and Ministers Landsbergis, please. Of course, Lithuania played a special role in the unraveling of this movement. Can you maybe explain to us also now what is Lithuania's position? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Svetlana, it's indeed an honor to talk about Belarus and the situation, how we in Lithuania see it. It's indeed been very emotional to see Belarusians people's will to break free. And symbolically, just behind my back, there are some pictures from 30 years ago when Lithuania was fighting for its freedom in January 13th. Some people might remember this time as a golden age for democracies. So many countries willing to break free, so many people, despite the possibility of getting hurt, risking their lives, wished for freedom, wished for democracy, wished for their rights to be acknowledged in the free world. Later, what followed might look like that the will of the people is not there. We've seen so many countries that toyed, I say, with illiberal ideas. We're even come to the idea that maybe the age of democracy is coming to an end. And I say that in all of this that happened, especially last year, which was very difficult in many areas, Belarus was a silver lining. Even though I understand that Svetlana Tikhanovskaya is not in Belarus. She has to stay in Lithuania at the moment. And of course, I understand that many of Belarusian opposition have fled Belarus because of oppressions. I know that the people are suffering, but still I'm able to say that what we've seen gives us hope that democracy and the feeling of and the search for freedom and dignity is eternal. The people who went out after the stolen election last August to the streets, who are still out there despite the cold, despite the repressions that are being thrown at them, they give us hope that the will for freedom is eternal and it is there. And it gives us hope not only for the future of Belarus, but it also gives the hope for the whole free world that we are ready to fight when our basic rights are being taken away from us. So as a European, I stand for Belarus for both sakes, for the sake of Belarusian people and for the sake of our people, to remind us that freedom is not free. You have to fight for it. You have to fight for it for every day. And now we see Belarus and Belarusian people as a very brave example of how you do that, so that we don't forget, and those 30 years don't erase the memory of our fight for freedom. Now, the question arises, what can we do, and what Europe has to do in order to support Belarusian people's fight for freedom and liberty? I would distinguish several areas where help is needed. I'm very grateful for countries that help Belarusian opposition as it is now. We help the leaders. We help the Belarusian leaders to become the voice of the people in the free world. The voice for the voiceless was always a very important thing for the countries who are fighting for their freedom. But this is not enough. Belarusian people, in my belief, require justice. The courts that were supposed to defend people of Belarus now are part of the prosecuting system. They're not defending the people, they're throwing them in jail without a due process. Prosecutors who are supposed to prosecute criminals are prosecuting innocent people. Police who are supposed to protect and serve are protecting and serving the regime. And it might take some time for people to receive justice. And I think that this is a very important message, the very important message has to be sent from Europe, that up until the moment we wait when the free Belarusian Republic arises with free courts, free prosecutor system, and free police, the help in European capitals must be given. An example is already there. The Lithuanian prosecutor's office has started a case against Belarusian police in a case where a person, for a Belarusian citizen, was abused. I think this is just one example, but it's a very, very important example of what can be achieved, that justice can be served. And I think that more European countries can join in this effort. Second thing is we need to support the people in the streets, because they are fighting the most important fight in their lives. They're fighting for the free and democratic Belarus. We need patience. They need patience, because the fight and the victory might not be very fast. Even in Lithuania, we talk that our victory in 1991, in 13th of January, was not very fast to arrive. Only some time later, we joined EU, we joined NATO, and we enjoy all the privileges of free society. So our victory was served 15 years later, the real victory. So Belarusian people might have to wait for their victory as well, and the fight might be longer than expected. That's why we need support for the people. We need financial support, we need political support, anything that we can offer to the people, that they wouldn't feel neglected, they wouldn't feel alone in their fight. Lithuania and many other countries 30 years ago, we took all the symbols that we received from Western countries very seriously. We still have we have an Icelandic Day in Lithuania, just to remember the first country that recognized free Lithuania. So we understand the importance of support for fight for freedom. And third, not to forget the pressure on the regime. The regime is bunkered, only supported by the closest circle. But we cannot hope that it will just go away on its own. We need to cut all the power lines, all the support lines that feed the regime. And Lithuania will be active in this, together with the Belarusian opposition, working with this to build the support in Europe for more sanctions where they are possible. The hope is, and what we have to remember, what we are striving for. We're striving for, firstly, new elections, and I'm sure that they will come. And after that, we will see a free, democratic, liberated Belarus. And I'm sure that day is soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will now turn to Zbigniew Rau, Foreign Minister. Minister Rau, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear ministers, Mrs. Cichanowska, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here among friends and colleagues at yet another high-level international seminar devoted to Belarus. Our goal is to generate support throughout Europe for the democratic opposition and democratization of Belarus. We will also search for more ways to help. Belarusians stood up for their dignity and the values the democratic community shares, values that are the foundations of the European Union. We know that the biggest burden is carried by civil society, the people who long for freedom, who chose engagement over stagnation, those who were forced to leave the country and who decided to sacrifice their private life. Mrs. Cichanowska symbolizes these people. As I said during our previous meetings with Mrs. Cichanowska, Poland highly respects the activities of the democratic opposition. We, together with other states represented today, supplement your efforts. We offered a broad support, medical aid, educational perspectives, facilitation of procedures for entrepreneurs. We proposed the EU economic plan for democratic Belarus, which gained support of all 27 member states. We also react to the violations of human rights and adopt measures against those responsible. We will continue our international engagement. Year 2021 may be challenging and difficult for the Belarusian Democrats. This lays also additional responsibility on us, the EU and Euro-Atlantic community, to support civil society and to maintain pressure on the government in Minsk. We need to engage public opinion and opinion makers so as to inspire the EU institutions and European capitals to act. Let me thank the European Council on Foreign Relations in Paris for facilitating this opportunity today. The concept of prosperous future for Belarus must gain clear support from the whole family of democratic states, not only the usual countries such as Lithuania and Poland. I hope, together with prominent experts and the audience gathered, we will outline how we can further help Belarusians on their path to freedom and democracy. What has started last year cannot be stopped or suppressed. I believe the democratic Belarus and its heroic society will prevail. I wish all participants an inspiring discussion. Thank you, friends.
Thank you very much, Minister. Last but not least, we have a video by Minister Bogdan Aurescu from Romania that will be played now for you.
Esteemed colleagues, dear Mrs. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, I would like to thank the hosts and the initiators of this high-level event and to express my appreciation for the organization of this very timely discussion on Belarus and its relations with the European Union. Such events are essential in keeping the constantly aggravating situation in Belarus high on the international community agenda. We acknowledge the courage of the citizens of Belarus and of the representatives of the opposition, standing up for their rights despite the unceasing repressive conduct of the regime. The international partners of Belarus, including Romania, repeatedly condemned the violence against peaceful civilians and called for stopping the repression and, of course, the initiation of a peaceful, inclusive political dialogue. Unfortunately, the situation on the ground has not improved. On the contrary, continuous and increasing brutality of the regime against its citizens led to losses of human lives, thousands of arrests, cases of torture, political prisoners, a situation that should not and will not be tolerated. The people of Belarus aspire for democracy and respect for human and fundamental rights. They have the legitimate expectation for an opportunity to make their own decision on the future of their country. They request respect for their fundamental rights enshrined in international law. We cannot remain passive. We have to call for the support for those who express themselves for the values which are important for all of us. Romania reaffirms its will to support the people of Belarus in building a democratic path through a state leadership democratically elected, a free civil society, free market, and the rule of law. At the same time, we have supported and continue to do so the measure of sanctions against those responsible for the repression and election fraud, as well as against those who sponsor such acts. These restrictive measures are meant to keep pressure on those acting against the will of the people for democracy, fundamental rights, and civil liberties. Since the beginning of the events in Belarus, Romania has actively expressed its concerns by political declarations at high level and by coordinating its actions within the EU and other international like-minded partners. We also supported the activation of the Moscow mechanism within the OSCE and the initiative of an OSCE mediation mission. The President of Romania, together with his counterparts from Lithuania and Poland, issued a joint declaration on our offer for a democratic Belarus, an appeal to the international community and the European Union to prepare a package of economic assistance for the democratic Belarus. These ideas were later included in the EU larger package for Belarus. Romania also contributed with €100,000 to the European Endowment for Democracy projects in support of independent media and civil society in Belarus. And at the end of last year, the Romanian government approved 100 scholarships granted to Belarusian students, an offer that is to be operationalized in the coming days. However, more needs to be done by all of us, especially in political terms, in all relevant fora, in order to respond to the expectations of the Belarusian people. The world community needs, in fact, to properly put to work all the tools it developed to support human rights and fundamental freedoms, be it at UN, EU, OSCE levels, or Council of Europe, and other relevant international organizations. Just as a recent example, on 22nd of January, together with colleagues present at this dedicated event, I attended the UN Security Council high-level ARIA formula meeting on media freedom in Belarus. Romania will continue to call on the Belarusian authorities and its proxies and sponsors to stop repression and intimidation, to start a genuine inclusive dialogue with the opposition and the civil society, and to act responsibly for building social peace and prosperity based on democracy and respect for fundamental rights in a free, independent, and sovereign Belarus. Once again, Mrs. Tikhanovskaya, please receive my very best wishes of success in the endeavor of Belarusian people to uphold their rights. Thank you.
So this marks the end of our first session. I would like to extend my thanks to the ministers and of course to Ms. Tikhanovskaya who joined us for this very timely discussion. I am handing over to my colleague Niku for the panel discussion now. Niku, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tara. Thank you very much, Ms. Tikhanovskaya, dear ministers. And now we will proceed to the second panel where we will have an in-depth conversation, I hope, on events in Belarus, on the domestic situation, on the geopolitical and external environment in which these events evolve, on how the Europeans have been responding to these events, on Russian stakes in the events in Belarus. And with this, I would like to ask the first speaker, Franak Vichorka, to take the floor. Franak is a well-known politician and journalist in Belarus. He is also now foreign policy advisor to Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. And of course, in these last months, Franak has been one of the most articulate, most visible, and most timely voices explaining the international community, the dynamics in Belarus, what is happening in Belarus, what could be the potential responses of the international community. So I hope, Franak, that you can give us a good update on the situation and even more importantly, some good advice on what to do next. Franak, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, excellencies, ambassadors. It's a great pleasure, and thanks so much to ministers who talked about Belarus. I really admire your engagement, involvement, particularly to Lithuania, Poland, and also our neighbor Latvia in being involved in the Belarus issue. It's not just a political or humanitarian crisis, it's much wider. And now it seems it's getting bigger, and it also threatens the regional security. The revolution itself was not geopolitical from the beginning. People who were protesting, they protested against usurper who controls the country for 26 years. But in this revolution, we see the revival of Belarus nation, of Belarus identity. People self-organize, people build communities. They create new groups. We see emergent civil society in neighborhoods. We see how people organize small rallies despite mass arrests by Lukashenko's forces. Unfortunately, there are many pessimistic signals. Lukashenko's repressions are getting tougher and smarter. Some information, disturbing information, was revealed basically yesterday about concentration camp. This is how they call the special zone where they plan to put prisoners, political prisoners and detainees temporarily. And then, as we heard from the leaked audio by Lukashenko's top official, they were planning to build several such camps. Idea behind these camps is that the number of protesters is so big, and they don't have capacity enough to crack down and to isolate these people in the available infrastructure of detention centers and prisons. So they began developing and building prison camps. And recently we also heard that they are preparing for the March protests, and we also preparing for the March protest. We expect the second wave of protests, and we also unfortunately can expect the larger wave of repressions. What we all can do together with you, with your help, we can deter, we can prevent it. How to do this? By putting pressure, by condition collaboration, by condition any business, political, economic contacts with Lukashenko's regime, but also all those who support him as the dictator. It's very important to raise the cost for Lukashenko of repressing people, using violence, detaining arbitrarily different groups of protesters. It's very important to help people on the ground. Unfortunately, I must admit that assistance, technical assistance to media, to civil society didn't get through. It's very limited. We are very grateful to European Union decision, European Commission for deciding to support Belarus, and of course to neighboring countries and Romania also. Great thanks because of joining and announcing the support for this so-called Marshall Plan. But we still struggling how to help people on the ground. Media, which are on the front line, they are the first target of the regime. And we see how, on one hand, authorities are trying to limit them and cut them from any sources of funding. On the other hand, we see also how Russian private sector and oligarchs and groups are trying to buy out media. And this is another threat that appeared recently, and which is also very disturbing, because we try to sustain this emergent civil society, this media infrastructure, but we also see how authorities, with the support of third parties, are trying to destroy this infrastructure. And we ask you to pay attention to this, and also to find a way to keep this support going and to help people, not in Vilnius, Warsaw, initiatives, international organizations, but those who are on the ground. Students, activist groups, media initiatives, Telegram channels, human rights organizations paying for lawyers for repressed or imprisoned activists. Just for as an example, the lawyer per one political prisoner can cost from $2,000 to $4,000 per month. And now we have more than 1,000 people under criminal charges. Just imagine how much does it cost just to pay lawyers, just to have contact with people behind bars. It's very important to explore the new unconventional solution, how to help people on the ground. We are living in the digital age. This revolution was empowered by technology. So let's find out how to avoid bureaucracy, how to avoid Lukashenko's regime and administration, in order to help and cultural and civil initiatives, all those who need help at this moment. It's very important to send a very strong signal to Belarus people by not recognizing Lukashenko. This is why we also ask to be careful with presenting credentials to Lukashenko. I know that foreign diplomats explore several ways by sending ambassador but not giving credentials to Lukashenko. It's very important to not give Lukashenko the opportunity to to present such contacts as the diplomatic victory. This is what he is trying to do. Even he is trying to trade somehow. For example, okay, I release Vitaly Shklarov, is one of the former political prisoner, but in exchange he received the opportunity to talk to Secretary of State of the United States. You know, it was presented as the deal, and we should avoid, you know, such deals, because political prisoners cannot be the subject or objects or of such agreements or any forms of trade. The international recognition of the new majority, and this majority is formed. This majority includes very different groups of people. It's not about young people, it's not about intelligentsia, it's people of different views. There are pro-liberal, pro-conservative there are pro-Russian, there are pro-European among those new majority who protested against Lukashenka. And these meetings that you international governments organize and conduct with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and Coordination Council are very, very, very important. And again, let me emphasize the importance of the work done by Lithuania, Poland, and Latvia, to be fair, in legitimizing the new majority. Lithuania, for example, by decision of parliament, recognized Svetlana Tikhanovskaya as elected leader of Belarus people. This was a very strong decision, very strong message to Belarusians. And we really expect that other governments will follow this example, because this recognition, it creates the very strong pressure on the regime on one hand, but also it strengthened the negotiation position of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. And negotiations are unavoidable. Dialogue is unavoidable. Peaceful transformation, this is our goal. And with your support and strengthening our position, we can expect that this dialogue and this transformation will be quick, peaceful, and efficient. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya met many of your presidents and prime ministers, and that was very well taken in Belarus, we must say. One of the picture I saw recently, which gathered hundreds of thousands of likes and shares, this is the picture of countries, of leaders who met Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and it includes many EU countries, Canada, United States, and countries leaders who met Alexander Lukashenka. There is only one. And that was this is very spectacular, and people are commenting that this is what we were dreaming about, you know, that Belarus, open to the world, inclusive, positive, who can be a alliance partner for others. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Franak. With this, I'd like to invite Lawrence Meredith to share with us his analysis of the situation. And Lawrence is someone I've known for many years, who has worked tirelessly on the Eastern Partnership, and he is now Director of the EU's Eastern Neighborhood at the Directorate General for Neighborhood and Enlargement in Brussels, part of the European Commission. He's the go-to person in Brussels on developments such as the developments in Belarus. And with this, Lawrence, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nico, and thank you very much. It's an honor to have the opportunity to participate with Svetlana and Franak, with whom we're in close and regular contact, as well, of course, as following on from the distinguished speeches by the foreign ministers of France, Poland, Lithuania, and Romania. I mean, this shows how high, rightly on the agenda, the struggle of the Belarusian people is for the European Union. And we stand united in their, as they show unwavering courage on the streets in freezing temperatures. They will soon have reached 6 months of protests on an unprecedented scale. And it's very clear that as many have spoken, but in particular our Lithuanian minister, eloquently of how people are fighting for the democratic future of their country. And we stand very strongly behind that. What I can say is to underline that we are making every effort possible to ensure that assistance is brought as rapidly as possible to the people of Belarus who most need it. That's why we have a regular dialogue with Svetlana and her team. And we fully agree that the priority where we first put our assistance is to ensure that people get medical and legal support. I think Franek spoke very clearly and eloquently about the obvious need for that, with the vast number of people facing arrest and imprisonment and the violence of repression. And we want to provide through the European Endowment for Democracy and whatever channels are most effective to reach people fast, that we will do. And that was the focus of the first response, but it continues to be increasingly important, and we will step up to the plate to ensure that people get that support. We've also announced support, 24 million euros of assistance, where we again agree that civil society and independent media need to be above all the focus, helping also improve health capacities, reaching out to youth and facilitating, and I know a number of our member states are looking at how to promote exchanges with people, youth, but also, as Franek said, independent trade unions, teachers, and other people who are struggling, not just in Minsk, but across the territory of Belarus, to bring support to advance this democratic future. And we want to give them every support that we can. We will continue to work very closely as we call for a halt to the violence, release of political prisoners, and the start of a genuine and inclusive national dialogue, as the French Foreign Minister said. It's essential that the people of Belarus have the opportunity to express their democratic rights. We will do everything on the side of the European Union to facilitate their access to what they need for that purpose. And we've agreed to meet on a very regular basis with Svetlana's team, with Franek, and to ensure, as he rightly says, that there should be no bureaucracy, no delays, but to make sure that the assistance gets to the people as fast as possible. And that's what I'm committed to do. And I would also like to add the words on behalf of Katerina Maternova, our Deputy Director General, also passionate to support this cause, but unfortunately illness means she couldn't join today. So it's my privilege and pleasure to address you on this occasion. I'll keep it short for now, Niku, but of course delighted to answer any questions that people may have, and looking forward to the speeches from my other from other colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. The questions are gathering. I remind the audience that you can ask questions in the question and answers box, and we are seeing these questions. I would also like the speakers to have a look at the questions while other people are speaking. And if you'd like to prepare an answer or already address it in your interventions, that is something that will be welcome. If not, I will readdress these questions after the initial remarks will take place. And with this, I would like to invite Marcin Przydacz, who is Under Secretary of State for Security, the Americas, Asia and Eastern Policy at the Polish Foreign Ministry. And we all know how important and how active Poland is on this dossier. And we, of course, have heard the minister. But now, Marcin, the floor is yours to develop and delve deeper into the topic. You need to unmute, or I will try to unmute you. I cannot.
Okay, now it's better, probably. Yes.
Okay, works.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry for technical problem. Thank you, Nico. It's an honor to be here with you among friends. I must tell you that when we came up with the idea to organize that kind of seminar and we approached our Lithuanian friends, we hadn't expected that it would be such a great initiative, and so many people will be interested in discussing the current situation in Belarus. As far as I know, there are 700 people subscribed to this channel, so it is a great success of all of us, and also the French organizers of this event. Thank you for that. I'll try to be brief and concrete first. I'd like to give you a short answer to questions posed in the invitations. There were 3 pillars of questions. Further about Belarus and the chance for regime change. The second about the plans of Europe, and the third, what is Russia plotting for Belarus in the next year? So, what are the chances for a regime change in Belarus? I would say that the chances are there, and this is a matter of time. And I agree fully with Franek and Wieczorka. Alexander Lukashenka still enjoys some support externally from Russia, as well as internally, of course, the security forces. But he won't be able to function in such a bubble indefinitely. Belarus and civil society are changing and maturing. The expression of nations' dignity and the heroic, massive awakening are assets that nobody can take away from Belarusians. Last August, our Belarusian neighbors started a process that cannot be stopped or revoked, no matter how brutal the authorities are or will be in the future. There are signals that the spring, and we've heard also it's today during our discussion, that the spring may bring new wave of protests as the economy is in dire condition. And I would say, and the spirit of the people on the streets is still there. Of course, because of the repressions, because of the weather conditions, maybe we are not witnessing that many hundreds of thousand people as it was before. But I truly believe that it's not the end; it's not over. And in the spring, we'll see again the people marching on the street protesting against the regime. And Mr. Lukashenko is not anymore an asset, but a kind of liability for Russia. Look how dramatically the situation has changed within the last 5 months. Anything can happen, and this leads me also to the second issue, which is what can Europe do, and what Europe is planning to do, and how to keep Belarus in the agenda. The future of Belarus in 2021 and beyond depends only on us. Of course, not solely and probably not to the largest extent, but still we bear a part of responsibility, and we have to live up to it. First, the EU redefined its policy and priorities towards Belarus, relocated financial resources to support civil society. Lawrence already mentioned 24 million euro were already somehow sent to the civil society of Belarus. Sanctions were implemented against almost 100 people and 7 entities. Poland, together with V4 partners, proposed the adoption of an economic plan called in Belarus the Marshall Plan for the new democratic Belarus, which could be offered to Belarus once a democratic transition has started. It is a part of kind of positive agenda for Belarus in this transformation, and the idea was accepted by all the 27 members of the EU. It's not that it's not always like this. It's not that common that without any objections, 27 countries accepted the Marshall Plan, and I'm very pleased that we've done it. But unfortunately for now, we're still waiting for the Commission to present this document officially, and I would say that there is no better time to present it than the 7th of February, announced by Madam Tsihanowska, the Solidarity Day with Belarus. It's the perfect moment for a symbolic gesture of support for all those who fight for democracy. it would also fit just before the People's Congress starting very soon upon the decision of Mr. Lukashenka. Many countries has also individually recalibrated the support. As we got Poland, we've been implementing a set of concrete measures to help Belarusian opposition, as well as ordinary people fearing persecution, like humanitarian aid, facilitation of visa processes, educational offer. Our comprehensive support is implemented under the Solidarity Plan with Belarus worth another 12 million euro. And secondly, we'll continue, of course, our policy to restrictive measures if that is needed, both against persons as well as entities. There cannot be any doubt that violation of human rights will be punished. Thirdly, we have many international institutions which can be used to exert additional pressure on Belarus. The latest meeting of the UN Security Council in the area formula organized by our ally Estonia and co-sponsored also by Poland and France and Lithuania. It was devoted to the freedom of media in Belarus. And that was an excellent example of that kind of approach, that we have to keep it on the international agenda. I believe that the Human Rights Council has still potential to be used, and also OSCE waits for its role in solving this crisis. We are in permanent contact with with our Swedish partners who are presiding the OSCE. We are taking the lead next year, so for sure OSCE will play a significant role in this crisis. And the third question was about what is Russia plotting for Belarus? And this question I would say deserves a separate series of webinars. What is Russia plotting for? And then you can put any name of the country. But as for Belarus, we know exactly what is Russia plotting for. It's always the same: broaden its sphere of influence and tighten its grip over the country. What we don't know is what instruments will Russia use this year. I'm afraid Russia will continue taking advantage of Belarus' weak position in different spheres, especially military. More presence, it may happen, of Russian forces in Belarus, and economic, of course, attempts to take over Belarusian strategic companies by Russian oligarchs. And Alexander Lukashenka has no means to prevent it. Belarus' hope lies in the civil society. We need to support people in Belarus so that whatever the scenario Russia chooses, they are the part of it, and the role of the West, of us, the European Union, may be really decisive for Belarus if we only understand this fact. And that leads me to three very short additional remarks on Russia. One of the EU strategic goals is to be a kind of global actor. Ursula von der Leyen publicly said many times that we want to be a global, very active actor. To be one, we need to confirm to confirm the EU's role also at the regional level. Stabilization, prosperity, and democratization of our direct neighborhood is our European strategic interest. Everyone who acts overtly against our interests should be treated accordingly. Meanwhile, we condemn Moscow for supporting Lukashenka and using chemical weapons against its political opponents. And at the same time, some member states insist on strengthening cooperation with Russia and strengthening Russia's gas monopoly, and are ready even to buy more gas from Russia. I wouldn't say that's a good approach. And two additional very short remarks on the civil society. Belarus has changed and will never be the same, and this is thanks to the civil society and its political awakening. This is the best chance for Belarus to start the democratic transition. and we must invest in this assets, support them, offer clear and positive alternative. Let me once again stress the importance of the EU economic plan. And finally, on human rights, we listen to Belarusian opposition appeals, and we take it really seriously. Evidences of human rights violation need to be gathered in a systematic way. There is a need to create an accountability mechanism for systemic gathering of documentation on the most serious human rights violation and abuses in Belarus. I'll put a full stop here. Of course, ready to answer any questions if there are. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marcin. With this, I'd like to give the floor to Dan Nicolaescu, who is Secretary of State at the Romanian Foreign Ministry. And on top of that, he's actually a very good friend. We've spent hours together with Dan building and trying to build infrastructure that anchors another neighboring state of the EU in the European economic and infrastructural and value space. But that's for another topic. But with that done, the floor is yours, and we'd love to hear what is the Romanian approach to the situation.
Yes, thank you very much, Nick. We indeed, we spent hours, and I hope we do going to spend hours, and we're going to succeed in the end to connect the two countries' infrastructure. Now, I'd like to also to join others in thanking the host and organizers for this timely discussion. Indeed, I think it's important to keep the momentum and to talk about the situation in Belarus as much as we can, and to keep the situation in Belarus on our radar. It's very difficult at this stage to add more to what has been said. However, in the light of what Franak had said, that the countries surrounding Belarus are doing the burden, to try to help a democratic Belarus, I would also like to express and to reiterate here very forcefully our position on this issue, because it takes those countries doing the hard work, and we are very thankful for the countries the Franak has mentioned, Lithuania, Latvia, of course, Poland. But we also want to join our forces from the eastern part of the southern part of the eastern flank, as they call it, just to join forces and our rhetoric and narratives together with them. So our position on Belarus is quite clear. I think we are friends and supporters of the people of Belarus. We are supporters of the sovereignty and independence of Belarus. This is very important to highlight. We strongly condemn violence against peaceful protesters, and we deeply appreciate the efforts of the people of Belarus and the opposition to stand for their rights. Given this, it's clear that in our assessment, as been said here before, the situation now is not improving at all. We have witnessed increased brutality, citizens' arrest, torture continues. In the 21st century, such atrocities at the gates of Europe, in my view, are unacceptable. So yes, we have to do more. And as Marcin had said here, to try to also look towards a mechanism, more efficient mechanism to monitor and to respond to the human rights violation. Another point that I wanted to make, and it's also in your questionnaires that we have received at the beginning of this discussions, what can we do more? What can we do? I think it's been said here, keep a well-calibrated pressure on the regime. The simple fact that we have this discussion here in this webinar, it's very important, because one thing is for sure, there are people in Belarus and there are people in other countries that are counting on our fatigue, are counting on us losing the breath. Not only us, but also the people in Belarus. So the people in Belarus have to know that they have supporters, and we are among them. Of course, we also have to look towards sanctions. The more we see torture, the more we see violation of human rights, sanctions have to be in place. We also have to support the Belarusian people. It's been said so far in many ways. EU should continue, as Lawrence had said, working on a supportive package for the people of Belarus. We, Romania, more modest, but nevertheless continue to support the people of Belarus. We have mentioned in my minister's speech 100,000 for European endowment, up to 100 scholarships for the students that are refused by the regime to go back to classes because of the political stance. I think this is very important. We have joined the 16 like-minded countries in Vienna and call for OSCE Moscow mechanism. Yes, we should indeed, and I agree with everybody that has been said that, use the organizations more efficiently in this respect. In our view, this is not an easy endeavor nor an easy battle. It takes a lot of energy to continue. We have to preserve our energy. We are not very, I think the regime has the intention to climb on its power, and this will continue nevertheless. So speaking of outside actors, I have a very frank question. Who is scared of a democratic Belarus? I'm not scared. And these countries represented here are not scared. But I think we have witnessed in Russia recently the events surrounding Navalny's arrest is a demonstration that we know exactly who is afraid and who is helping the Belarusian regime. So in a nutshell, continue the pressure, continue the dedication, and keep Belarus on our agenda in European Union and in other organizations. I think this is at least we can do to help the Belarusian people. Thank you very much.
Have a technical glitch. I haven't seen yet a call without a single technical glitch in the last 10 months, so I apologize. Thank you very much, Dan. With this, I would like to invite Mantas Adomėnas, who is Deputy Foreign Minister of Lithuania. And until recently, he had a very long career in Parliament. So he's also been someone who is in touch with the people, perhaps, and we'd love if you can share with us the Lithuanian approach to the situation in Belarus, and what do you think could be next in terms of EU actions on the situation in this important neighbor of not just Lithuania and Poland, but the entire European Union. Mantas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And dear colleagues, dear friends, first of all, I'd like to thank our hosts for this excellent and truly insightful discussion. And it is at once harrowing and exciting to talk to you on the issue of Belarus. It is harrowing when we see sufferings of people who are harassed, beaten up, arrested, driven to exile, imprisoned, tortured, and even killed. And it's also exciting because for once, for the first time in, I think, more than a decade, we're within a striking distance from a democratic outcome. And many things could still go wrong. There are many scenarios where things can go wrong, and there is only one and fairly narrow path where it can more or less go right. But this is what we should be striving for. Of course, the most depressing scenario is the one where status quo prevails, whereby Lukashenko is not fulfilling his obligations to Russia given in Sochi, because he understands that in this way his days are counted, and he deviates from the promises. The prospects of referendum on constitutional amendments disappears, and all Belarusian National Congress, which I totally agree is a trap, is convened to discuss amendments to the constitution which determine the future of the Belarusian government. And these constitutional amendments then would be drafted by people close to the regime, obviously, and in line with Lukashenko's ambition to stay in power. Thus, time is wasted, fatigue in the West deepens, initiatives are being found to rebuild the endangered dialogue, and basically what happens is reconciliation, that Lukashenko stays in power. And in essence, this is the same pattern, the same vicious cycles that we've seen after previous sort of falsified elections, so-called. So this is one scenario, and then I think that's most depressing. No less depressing, and then I think also quite sort of threatening is the scenario of Russian takeover, and which would happen with the constitutional pseudo-reform underway, which reduces the power of the president but strengthens the parliament, at the same time simultaneously with mass creation of pro-Kremlin parties, which would be being formed and registered, and as well as Kremlin takeover of the media, which I think was mentioned today. Then the constitutional reform will take place in 2021, followed by new parliamentary elections, but this would be led by pro-Moscow parties. And Lukashenko remains temporarily and resigns immediately after the new controlled, but controlled in a new way, in the way that Moscow knows how to control things, election in Belarus. Then majority of elected candidates would be in favor of closer ties with Russia. This would be also dangerous because the headache in sort of nominally would disappear in the West, that because Lukashenko is no longer in power, but in reality nothing changes insofar as Russia, to a lesser or greater degree, would continue to control, well, would exercise control over Belarus. And in fact, the situation would become even more complicated insofar as any prospect for democracy, any prospect for freedom would be inextricably linked to the fate of democracy in Russia, which is sort of, well, different and a larger, if I may say so, kettle of fish. And the third sort of desirable scenario, or my colleagues initially put it on the paper as wishful scenario, I hope it's not wishful scenario and it's not wishful thinking, is whereby coordinating council becomes a recognized partner of dialogue with the government. And there is a sort of genuine political dialogue between the outgoing government and the society, the civil society. Whereby the new presidential election is announced this year, organized by newly appointed Central Electoral Commission, and under the auspices of the sort of observation of OSCE or DEAR mission, and there is a peaceful transfer of power. So that's the sort of the optimistic scenario. But none of the above scenarios are likely to materialize in isolation from coordinated actions by Belarusian civil society, as well as the actions and interests of external actors in this crisis, especially Russia, and as well as the West, and represented by EU and United States and other NATO allies. And of course, we should recognize that Belarusian society is doing things at the moment, even as we speak. All those brave people in the streets, in the cold, in the rain, they're beaten up and arrested and not giving up. And our primary duty is to assist them in a meaningful way, in a sort of pragmatic way, and not to neglect their cause. And there is really nothing terribly new that we can advise here, except for two things, which is patience and resolve. Stick to our guns and show some spine. And it's not easy. And we see that it's not easy, and we see sort of lots of waverings. And there are lots of distractions happening to the east. However important are things which are happening now in Moscow and the Russian cities, Belarus should not be pushed off the menu of the sort of agenda of the EU. So what can we do? I mean, in order to affect the situation in a positive way, we should do the following and avoid the following. First of all, recognize that normalization of the present condition is a major defeat, is a major common defeat for all of us. International mediation, if there is any, should discuss two things: organization, and two things and nothing more. Organization of the new presidential election in 2021 and in line with the OSCE or DEAR standards. And the second thing is release of political prisoners. The pressure on the regime should continue, including further expanded sanctions, sanctions which reach further down to ordinary mid-level, lower-level perpetrators of everyday sort of violence and offenses against justice, such as OMON officers, policemen, judges who sort of hand out sort of unjust sentences. And so, you know, there should be no impression that even these sort of low-level actions under orders could remain unpunished. But also sanctions against, meaningful sanctions against oligarchs and economic entities, financially support the regime. So in this respect, coordination with our transatlantic partners is of paramount importance. Such things as presentation of credentials to illegitimate president should be seen as a recognition of should be seen as legitimizing the corrupt regime and should be avoided at any costs, as well as other attempts at having sort of separate negotiations, separate better conditions, any attempts at concluding, as it were, a sort of separate peace should be very strongly discouraged. And I know whom I'm addressing here. Belarus should remain within the Eastern Partnership policy, but any further actions within this framework should be guided by the principle: nothing for the regime and everything for the people. And of course, we should prepare for the optimistic scenario beforehand in case, and I think this has been mentioned, the Marshall Plan, we like this name, that my colleague mentioned, but in case Belarus returns to the sort of democratic transition path, we should be well prepared beforehand to assist the Belarusian nation and the democratic transition by providing a package of assistance for the country's economic transformation, including inter alia facilitation of trade with the EU, visa-free travel, assistance in energy security, access to financial resources, as well as boosting investments. And last, I think, but not least, in the view of this very, I think, threatening sort of Kremlin takeover scenario, we should very clearly communicate beforehand that any new agreements or commitments which limit Belarus sovereignty and which included in a new sort of union state with Russian Federation will not be recognized, and this should be very clear red lines established beforehand. As I said, there is nothing frightfully new here. It's a question of who will blink first, basically, and we, Europe, for once, cannot afford to do that. What is at stake is the prospect of freedom for 10 million people at the center of Europe, not the gates of Europe, it's the center of Europe, and our credibility as force for the goods is also at stake here. So we have no chance of, well, there are many scenarios, but we should count and bank on the one which leads to democratic and free Belarus, and we should direct all our efforts there and not be distracted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mantas, and I confess that that's the first such conference with so many speakers and time for a proper discussion, which only attests to how disciplined and organized have been the speakers in sparing their words and making sure we have time to react to the questions that such an event would inevitably arise. With that, we have over 30 questions. I've tried to group them. So I will I'll go through a list of questions and I will ask the speakers to react and choose and pick. And if you heard that one of the questions has been addressed, it doesn't mean you have to address it again, unless you strongly disagree with your previous responder. So I will now throw into the conversation the questions we've received in a more or less grouped way, and then I will ask the speakers to react to that. We have several families of questions, and one series, quite a lot of questions are basically addressed at the European Union. And our listeners basically are asking questions related to more details on what other practical steps the EU and the EU member states can do, are doing, or can do more to support people in Belarus, people who have stayed on in Belarus, their families, people who have been tortured, people who have escaped from the country. This subject has been partly touched upon, but if you feel like there is something to elaborate on, please feel free to do so. I know that the European Endowment for Democracy has been mentioned a couple of times as being one of the instruments through which European and EU member state assistance to the political process in Belarus is taking place. Perhaps you can give us a bit more details on the kind of things the European Endowment for Democracy is doing. A second kind of sub-question related to the EU is we have several questions on where are we with the policy of sanctions. Will there be more sanctions? What is the state of play regarding the intra-EU conversation on economic sanctions against Belarusian companies? Is there a conversation regarding EU companies currently operating in Belarus through the prism of potential application of more sanctions? There are a series of questions related to that. Then there's a group of Russia-related questions, and there's of course several of them. One series of questions relates to what are some of the European Union's ways of dealing with Russia on the Belarus dossier? We all remember that back in August, September, the EU message to Russia was quite clear, and it was centered around the idea of encouraging and asking Russia not to interfere with the development of the situation in Belarus. So one legitimate question is, if several months after, what is the European Union's assessment of Russia's interference or non-interference in the situation in Belarus? And what are the EU responses to that non-interference or interference? You choose which side of the debate you stand on. There's a specific question to Franak on whether, Franak, you can elaborate on what are Russia's media activities in Belarus, how important is that? There's also a couple of questions raising the fear of the risk of, and the question of how far is Russia ready to go in terms of saving Lukashenko's political system. The issue of a potential military or direct police support and almost intervention into events in Belarus should events develop in a negative scenario is being evoked. So one of the questions is, do you fear that sometime down the road, if the situation degenerates, we might even face a situation where Russia acts through a direct police interference way or even a military intervention type of way? And there's several questions related to how do we engage Russia. There's, of course, an understanding that Russia holds Russia has quite a lot of potential influence on the development of the situation in Belarus. And therefore, one of the questions is to what extent the EU can find ways to engage or incentivize Russia to support a transition in Belarus. There is a specific question regarding the forthcoming visit by Josep Borrell to Moscow late next week, and whether Belarus will be on the agenda. And there's a question also that relates to one of the questions is asking whether and to what degree the current wave of protests in Russia over the jailing of Navalny is likely to impact Russian policy on Belarus. Will this make Russia double down on its support for Lukashenko? Will it make Russia somewhat more distracted from the situation in Belarus? It would be good if any of the speakers feels like elaborating on the interplay between this current wave of protests in Russia and the situation in Belarus. Franak, you also have several direct questions directly addressed to you. I mentioned one related to the media, Russian media activities in Belarus. There's also a question related to the degree of unity of the Belarusian opposition. Is everything okay on that front? How divided is the opposition movement? Is this something that has an impact on real life developments in Belarus or not really? And there's of course a question related to France. And the question there is, what exactly would you expect more from France on the Belarusian dossier? That's more or less some of the families of questions that have been asked. Yes, there's another question related to whether the OSCE might have a role. And the question regarding the Marshall Plan, I think, has been addressed by the speakers, so perhaps we can skip that. With that, I will ask the speakers to start reacting to this long series of questions, and I'll ask the participants and the listeners to this debate to ask another round of families of questions if you have more questions that we could address. So with this, I'll go in reverse order, and I would like to ask Mantas to start reacting to some of the questions asked, but please feel free not to address all of them because we have plenty of speakers who can still so if you could choose 3-4 questions that you would prefer to address, and then we'll try to address the other questions by the other speakers. Mantas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. There were some questions linked to scenarios of developments in Russia, how sort of the current protests against arrest of Navalny and this general discontent with Putin, how are they going to affect Russia's possibility to act in Belarus? Of course, I mean, sort of, yeah, there is one line of thinking that it might decrease level of tolerance for any sort of protest activities, because what we see is already a sort of a common trend and a mutually influencing trend of civil disobedience to authoritarian regimes in both countries. So in fact, doubling down on sort of suppressing the protests in Belarus could be instrumental in controlling the situation in Russia itself. That's one line of thought. Another is that, of course, the events in Russia are going to be a distraction and a strain on capabilities. And in fact, I would be sort of more inclined to go along with the first scenario. That's to say that the threat to Putin's regime in Russia itself would be an encouragement to act more blatantly and perhaps more aggressively in Belarus, and to speed up sort of any attempts at takeover, insofar as not only sort of Putin cannot afford to sort of have mass protests happening in this sort of unified sort of infosphere of Russia, Belarus, but also any sort of victory, so-called, in the foreign affairs, any sort of diplomatic coup in bringing Belarus back to the fold of being the Soviet Union, which is being restored in sort of Mr. Putin's thoughts, is going to be presented for the domestic audience as another sort of legitimation of Putin's regime. So I think this is the protests in Russia, if anything, are more likely to encourage more aggressive and more adventurous posturing in Belarus and further attempts at implementing this Kremlin takeover scenario. What can we do? I mean, sort of, I think I indicated that very clear red lines should be drawn, and now it's a question for us, sort of what are the sort of, what are we ready to sacrifice for the credibility of EU as a sort of as an actor which exercises political will on its very sort of on its closest neighborhood. So I think that Mr. Borrell should raise it in Moscow, and should raise it on uncompromising terms. Are we ready to throw sort of things like Nord Stream 2? I think we should. We should raise this question whether sort of, this is one of the instruments that we can sort of use to discourage this sort of approach, this aggressive sort of approach on Moscow's behalf. So I'm very apprehensive. I'm very apprehensive at what is going to happen in the next 6 months vis-a-vis Russia. While we should do all we can, we should also prepare sort of to support protesters in Belarus in very concrete ways. Sort of, and this is one of the things where solution actually lies on the street level. If sort of the people who go out every day and sort of who risk violence and imprisonment feel that they're sort of being supported, so that they are sort of, they have legal protection, that they can sort of get sort of, if things go, if the getting going gets sticky, if they have a visa waiting for them, this is a very sort of concrete thing that they can feel. It's not something that would splash out across the headlines. But this is everyday sort of very concrete activity that we should direct at this, and we should strain our sort of capacity of our civil societies, of our NGOs to the utmost to do that. It's not, as I said, it's not attention grabbing, but it's very, very important, I think, to people who are now fighting. I think I'll stop here because we'll come back sort of maybe for other questions.
Thank you very much, Mantas. Dan, is there anything?
Yes, Nico. I would like also to address the issue. I mean, to remind the viewers today that the Romanian president, together with the Polish president and the Lithuanian president, signed a joint letter addressed also to the EU, in which they describes how the EU support the package for Belarus. And I'm just quoting because I think it's important to mention this. The facilitation of trade with the EU and assistance in WTO accession negotiations, visa-free regime when the necessary conditions are in place, assistance for the diversification of the energy sector and Belarus energy security, access to financial resources for the restructuring and kickstarting the Belarus liberal economy, and increasing international financial institutions' presence and activity in reforming the economy and boosting investments. I think these are very important aspects. I will also add, when it comes to the sanctions that you mentioned, Romania always has been in favor of sanctions when we see the atrocities in Belarus. So we are prepared to move forward if the case may be. Against discussions on Russia, I think it's important what our colleague from Lithuania has just said. But on the same token, I have to remind colleagues that Russia has the capability to change tactics very fast. So I think what we need to do is to keep the solidarity in the European Union and keep a very strong message addressed to Moscow on a unitary voice. And I think this is exactly what Mr. Borrell has to do when he goes there in Moscow in a couple of weeks. I think we are going to work this inside the EU. We have the strength, we have the capability, and I'm sure in our discussion we can find a very strong message to Russia. I think dialogue is important, but at the same time, the terms of the dialogue should be very clear. We would like to see that Belarusian people are protected and that the Belarusian people's voice is heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. Martin?
Okay, thank you once again for those questions. There were several issues mentioned: EU, Russia, possible measures. I would say that's, and I would agree with Dan that of course what we need among the EU is the unity. We shouldn't be a part of the Russian game, which is trying to play us out. I mean, to pick only those more constructive partners and to keep the dialogue with them rather than with those less constructive according to their position. We have a 5 principles rules. Let me remind it that we should keep the relations with Russia based on those 5 principles, which and that is not a menu in a restaurant that you can only pick 1 or 2 elements. There are all 5 elements, so there shouldn't be only the selective engagement, and there are some attempts of the countries of the EU member states to pick only the selective engagement and keep the dialogue with Russia rather than other elements. And there are several other things there. I mean, for example, strengthening relations with the Eastern Partnership countries and with the civil society, and that's the job which needs to be done when it comes to the relations with Belarus. We need to support the civil society and the free media there, because people really need the right information. And I dare to say that thanks to money invested in the free media, radios, TVs, we've done in previous years, so many people could reach the information which was based on true rather than the regime propaganda or direct Russian propaganda. So in that case, let me appeal also to other member states to maybe co-finance the free media in Belarus, including, for example, Belsat TV, which is probably the only at that scale big independent television. So far, it's mostly financed by the Polish government. There is also, for example, the Dutch support. But let me ask also other countries to be maybe a bit more active in that regard. Let me once again remind the Marshall Plan, the economic plan, and thank you very much for our Romanian and Lithuanian friends for supporting this at this very moment. It's really very much important. People in Belarus, they need to see a positive perspective, a positive plan. What are they waiting for? What is waiting for them in the future? About Russia, of course, there were questions about the possible intervention. I would say that they don't need to even think about the possible intervention. There are so many instruments they can play in Belarus. Also in the military one, I mean, there are exercises, the Russian-Belarusian exercises every year in Belarus. So the pressure on the government can be taken also by that kind of means, economic instruments, etc., and hybrid instruments. I mean, to influence. But I dare to say that Mr. Putin and the Kremlin is already fed up with Mr. Lukashenko. Really, I mean, they are not very happy with this. What they are afraid of is the scenario that the people on the street, the free people, protesting, can change the government, because it's very dangerous for Mr. Putin himself. Look at this, what is happening right now in Moscow and with Mr. Navalny. That's the scenario they are very afraid of. They are afraid of free people who are willing to change something in the country. But if there would be up to the Mr. Putin, I would say that they are interested also in changing the government or the situation in Belarus. That's why, and that could be maybe a surprise, as Poland, I dare to say that we need to have a dialogue with Russia. Of course, I mean it is a neighboring country, and we need to discuss also several things with that partner. But there are only two. How to say that? There are two things we need to remember. First, that the dialogue should be based on our rules, on the European principles, and the second, that the representatives of the civil society or the opposition or the people of Belarus should be at the table also. I mean, we shouldn't decide about the future of that country without the Belarusian people and without those who has the mandate to represent the country. And I think that Mr. Lukashenko has no mandate in that case. I mean, we know that the elections were neither free nor fair. So in that kind of dialogue, also with our Russian neighbors, the representatives of the civil society should play an active role. And I agree with Dan that if the visit of Mr. Borrell is necessary, what is the most important is to send strong signals also to Russia and to have a strong mandate from the member states. The unity of the union is crucial in that regard. And finally, the last question, not mentioned by Nico, but there was I've read about the possible mechanism of this human rights, how to gather in the systemic way of gathering the human rights violation. I would say that of course we have the Human Rights Council, and through this organization, through the UN, we could establish a kind of intergovernmental, serious, very important mechanism to gather all this information, which could be used in the future. I mean, because those who were criminals in that case, who violated human rights, who are responsible for repression, should be held to accountability in the future. That's from the one hand, but from the other, of course, we need to keep repeating that there is a positive scenario also for those who are working right now in the Belarusian administration. I can imagine that hundreds of people, thousands of people are working there because they are afraid of the future. We need to give them also the positive scenario that those people who are directly responsible for violation of human rights will be taken. I mean, will be held to the accountability. But those who are just working in the administration, there is a future in the future Belarus for them. So that would be my short answer to the question. Thank you very much, Nico, and thank you once again for this nice discussion.
Thank you very much, Marcin. Lawrence, the floor is yours to react to some of the questions that have been made.
Thank you very much indeed. And I I would also like to add my thanks to you, Nico, and the whole ECFR team for hosting this very important discussion. I think it shows very clearly how united the European Union is in response to events in Belarus, standing up for the future of a democratic Belarus and for the people of Belarus. And I think that is the French foreign minister in his opening remarks was extremely clear that this is a point of principle, and it is the principles to support the people. Violence is utterly unacceptable, and the EU, both through its approach on sanctions and through its support to the victims of violence in terms of medical support and legal support, sends a strong, united message and by the way, as Svetlana said in her opening remarks, it's important that the West is united. I think we now see the incoming US ambassador reaching out to the European Union, wanting to have a common front. So I think there is a strong and united position that democracy must win through. And we on the side of the European Union are ready to make every effort to support Svetlana and her team and the people of Belarus to press for democratic transition. And I think that we can and we will use all our instruments to do so. And I hear the calls for a comprehensive plan, and we're working hard to finalize that now. And I'm sure that there will be a clear and strong vision ahead in the very near future. So I think it's very important also that we come together like this to show a strong message of unity for the people of Belarus. It's especially important now, as Svetlana said, on the eve of 6 months of protests. We all know that January, February are the most challenging moments for this movement. And I think this strong political support and also practical support that the European Union offer, both of these are crucial to the future. And I'm sure, as Franek will say in a moment, working together, we can really make a difference to people on the ground, to the civil society, to the independent media, and to ensure that this message stays strong and clear and is a message of hope, freedom, and democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. And Franak, you have a chance to react to the toughest question.
Thank you. Yeah, I will try to react. And first of all, let me thanks to colleagues in Mantas and Lawrence and Marcin and Dan for your warm support. And I can just reiterate that only together, we can do this change. We were never so close to democratic transformation in Belarus. Basically, we were so far 1 year ago. Now we are so far, and we have to consistently, continuously doing what we have begun. And our demands did not change. We demand new, free and fair elections. We don't discuss here how to come to power. This is not the goal. How to come to free elections. This is the goal. And the road to free elections is the same. We want dialogue, and we want to discuss how these elections must be held. And international community support of other countries is important to make this process smooth. The revolution, we call it revolution or uprising, is needed in order to achieve the dialogue. Unfortunately, Lukashenka, he cut all possible ways of dialogue. He doesn't want it. He is hiding. He is avoiding. Even the representative of Lukashenka's parliament, at the Parliamentary Assembly at OSCE or at the UN Security Council, they always repeat in the end, but this is not a dialogue. This is not a communication with a representative of democratic forces, not at all. Let me take some of the questions that were mentioned. First, it was mentioned by my colleagues here as well. Belarus, unfortunately, it's not on the same way on the agenda as it was in August and September. Of course, many things did happen, and Russia did happen, and I think we should do all possible to get it back. It's much more important, and there is escalation of violence, and the situation is getting worse. We see that in the call between Biden and Putin, there is no Belarus on the agenda. We don't know if Mr. Borrell will raise Belarus. So let's make sure that Belarus is always on the agenda. And I ask here all colleagues, friends, ambassadors, diplomats, officials, and all the attendees to help us with this, to make sure that it is always discussed on the highest level and there is political will to solve the crisis, to not try it. Very often politicians are trying to close the issue, but not solve the problem. And I think we should take responsibility to finally solve it, and we are very close. Question from Emilia Pungiute Galois. What is the strategy to achieve democracy? And is EU ally for Belarus? Yes, European Union is the biggest ally, along with the countries, European countries, which are not members of EU, and Canada and United States play a huge role. When the revolution started, when the protest started and crackdown happened, the biggest support Svetlana Tikhanovskaya Coordination Council did receive from European countries, Canada, US, neighbors primarily. And we also received signals of support from Israel, for example. Ambassador visited office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya in Vilnius. There are messages coming that came from Japan, from even from East Asia, from some post-Soviet countries, but not on the government level yet. Regarding strategy, so we continue pressure from outside and inside. From inside, these are protests, economic resistance, boycotting the Lukashenko's cronies and his groups. On the outside level, isolation of the regime, recognition of his organizations, terrorist organizations, sanctioning them. They are really afraid of sanctions. Question from Evgenia Klementьeva and Erika Gyuritite. Media Russian activities and Russia-Belarus relationship. There is no Russian party in Belarus. There is no strong pro-Russian politician in Belarus. For many years, Russia invested in Lukashenko, and Lukashenko is the biggest and the only one pro-Russian politician in Belarus. And now when Russia sees that Lukashenko is bankrupt and it's not a very good investment anymore, they are looking for opportunities to find someone else or to build something else. But it will take a lot of time. This is why perhaps they speak about referendums, constitutional reforms, and other things, because they want time to make sure that this transformation will guarantee that Russia will not lose control over Belarus politics and elites. And we always assure that it's not geopolitical revolution. And Kremlin, please don't be afraid of this change. The only thing we want free and fair elections, and if there will be parties declaring friendship and collaboration with Russia, that's okay. There are such parties in every country in Eastern Europe. But unfortunately, they don't want to listen to us. They still want to add this geopolitical angle, and they make this protest and this uprising geopolitical. They want it to look it as geopolitical. And this is what they repeat often in Europe, that don't interfere in Belarus affairs. It's a geopolitical issue. They often compare Svetlana to Venezuelan Guaido. They compare to Ukrainian conflict. They want to show similarities with other situations which are not similar. Belarus situation is quite unique in its essence, in its context, in its development, and this is why approach must be different. And we shouldn't let Russia, to make this conflict geopolitical and to use it as a pretext for Europe to not support Belarusians fighting for human rights. A question from Pavel Zerka: what France can do more? France was, Emmanuel Macron was the first Western leader who met Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. And I had the chance to attend this meeting as well. And that was a very strong signal to Belarusian, and there was a very good discussion in Belarus and in France about support. But what we lacked, perhaps, we lacked the consistency. This signal was sent, but no one took responsibility. And this has often happened to Western leaders. from my experience that there is declaration of support, there is will to support, but there is no responsibility. If Western leaders, OSCE, international organizations will take responsibility for this part, for international investigation, for mediation, for organizing roundtable, for helping Belarusian people, take responsibility and tell, yes, we will take care of this. This is our part. Other European countries, let's divide tasks. That would be much helpful, collaboration in such way. Not always repeat, please, European Commission or Lawrence Meredith, do everything. We support you, Lawrence. Please help Belarusians. So this is not enough. The support must be consistent on national level, and the signals must come to Brussels all the time. Lawrence is powerful and his team is fantastic, same as Madame Maternova, but this is not enough. Unfortunately, their power is not enough, but they do extremely important work. Question from Erki Tomyoya, degree of unity, Tsepkala and others. Yesterday, Valery Tsepkala, Pavel Latushka, Olga Kovalkova, Coordination Council leadership, all of them came to visit Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and they spent 2 days discussing the plan of victory. There are discussions, there are different views, political views, geopolitical views between these people, but there is common vision and common plan. We have Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. This is the person who unifies everyone, and this is for the first time in Belarus history when we have entirely unified opposition, and let's keep it such. And she is a representative of all Belarusian forces. This is why sometimes she has to be neutral, she has to be milder in order to keep this unity without to not let political splits and differences come out. Question from KGB and Stefan, first package of sanctions. I think this question to European Union, but unfortunately this week Belarus question is not on the agenda of European Union foreign relations meeting, foreign relations ministers meeting. But first package of sanctions must be much bigger. Karpenko, who creates concentration camps in Belarus, officially already, and it's confirmed, he's not on the European Union sanction list, as example. This organization, terror groups doing atrocities and torturing people, they're not on the sanction list. The businessmen openly supporting Lukashenka, they're not on the sanction list. Some of them were drafted, but in the last moment, lobbyists worked very well and they were excluded from this list. I will take 1 more minute, Nico, this is okay? Trying to take more questions. Vyacheslav Gromylyuk, Belarus and Ukraine. Very limited contact with Ukraine government. There is communication with Minister Kuleba team. I hope this week there will be a communication and the virtual meeting between Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and him. I don't reveal details here, but I hope it will happen this week already. That will be the first formal contact between Svetlana Tikhanovskaya Coordination Council and Ukrainian government. But of course, President Zelensky must meet Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. This is my personal belief, and I think Ukraine must do this, and Ukrainian society must put pressure on Ukrainian government to do this. This would be fair, and this is what Belarusian people expect from Ukraine. Platform for Belarus Diaspora. Vafavati Zada asked about attacks against journalists. Journalists are the main target, same as activists, and there is no protection to them at all. It's the most risked profession in Belarus. They are shot. Natalia Lubnevskaya was shot. She was in the press west. It didn't help. Many of my friends journalists are in prison, including from Radio Free Europe, from Belsat TV, where I worked as well. We don't have instruments to help them besides instruments of pressure. Sanctions, assistance to media organizations, these are solutions. There is no silver bullet here. We should use traditional conventional tools combined with a non-conventional approach and de-bureaucratize these approaches to let European Endowment for Democracy, which makes tremendous work, crucial work, to avoid bureaucracy, same as other organizations, institutions, foundations working with Belarus, to have carte blanche and to work directly to the people. This is Belarus needs non-conventional solutions. I will stop here, 1 minute left, sorry.
Thank you very much, Franak. Before we end in a couple of minutes, I'd like just to do one follow-up question to Franak, and there was a question that I think is important. And that question is, given that, you know, the way events developed in the last months, it's clear Lukashenko is not into giving up power peacefully in a negotiated manner as a result of consensual negotiations with the opposition. So one of the questions was, what do you expect is the tipping point when power changes in Belarus? And do the evolution of events needs, or do you fear that at some point the tipping point might turn bloody rather than peaceful? What is the degree of your fear of this event degenerating into a bloody standoff as the only way to achieve transition in Belarus, given that so far the peaceful way has not really led to a transformation of the political system in line with popular will? Franak, maybe 1 minute, and then I will end the event after that response.
I hope Belarus uprising will never become violent and bloody. The only violence we see from Lukashenko's cronies, and they do it constantly, and they want protesters to become bloody. We do all possible to keep it peaceful, non-violent. This is tough, this is difficult. There are many groups that want to resist more actively, but we are stopping them and saying, wait for sanctions, wait for pressure. Let's use our tools. We have so many instruments. Unfortunately, we don't receive so much as we ask. You know, 80 people on the sanctioned list, it's a joke. This few companies on the list, it's a joke. But we still say, no, let's not use hope, let's use economic pressure, international pressure. Let's try to force Lukashenko to sit at the negotiation table peacefully. This is our goal. And more time we lose, more time we wait, less active we are right now, more chance that it will become violent. So let's keep it on the agenda, let's keep it on the radar, let's support people on the ground, let's support civil society, and genuine, vibrant media that works there and cover events. And this is the guarantee that this peaceful revolution will become a peaceful transformation, which will lead to free elections.
Thank you very much, Franak. And with this, I'd like to mention a couple of things towards the end of the event. First of all, unfortunately, and this event had a kind of gender balance that we tried to avoid, but that was partly due to some last-minute changes to the agenda. It was not related to the intention of the organizers. And I'd like to also thank a lot several people who are not necessarily on the agenda itself, but who have worked tirelessly in the last weeks to make this event happen. And of course, I'd like to thank the Polish, Lithuanian and Romanian embassies in Paris, who came up with the initiative of organizing that, and the Quai d'Orsay, and some specific persons in these institutions, including Magdalena Dobrovolska, Ugne Matulevicene, Lelia Constantinescu, as well as on the ECFR side, another series of unsung heroes, such as Tefta Kelmendi, Mathilde Sula, Felix Mengel, and Amanda Pope. Thank you very much. This event has taken place in this, I find, successful manner thanks to you. And with this, I'd like to thank all the panelists and speakers and listeners. We will be back in covering this topic as the CFR. Follow our website. We have a very good team of experts. We have a full-time Belarus analyst, Pavel Slunkin. We also have Andrew Wilson and Gustav Gressel, who are covering events in Belarus in a systematic and regular manner on our website. And we will be back with such events on Belarus, but also on other countries in the Eastern Partnership and Russia and the Balkans. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. And I think, as this debate showed, events are not necessarily evolving in the right direction in the short term, but international attention, support, and solidarity with Belarus is there. No one forgets Belarus. There is huge support, but there needs to be more, as we all know, specific to support to specific people in Belarus who are suffering, who some of them needed to emigrate, whose families are suffering. That support is there, but we need more to do more to help both individuals, but also the political process in Belarus to be more reflective of the will, of the popular will of the people of Belarus. Thank you very much, everyone. And with this, I am closing this event with a huge thanks to all of you. Bye-bye.